bubbling up all around. Why does it feel like there's this generational war brewing for the future of America?
Yeah.
We're looking hard at why younger people, say under 40 millennials, Gen Z, why they seem so fundamentally angry. Is it justified? And what are the deep, maybe hidden reasons behind it all?
You've absolutely hit the nail on the head. And what we want to do is move past just, blaming people or picking political sides. What you're sensing, this sort of bitter conflict, well, the sources we're looking at, they diagnose it. It's predictable. Structural.
Structural, okay.
We're going to get the lens of cybernetics. That's the science of control and communication. Thinkers like Stafford Beer pioneered this. It helps us look at the mechanics of the system failure, not just the moral outrage.
So it's not about good guys and bad guys?
Not at all. It's about diagnosing, well, what the sources call a catastrophic clash. A clash between the sort of ingrained habits of an old, outdated way of organizing things.
Obsolete, you mean?
Exactly, an obsolete framework.
Yeah.
And clashing against the sheer explosive potential of people, of human variety, that this old system is almost designed to, well, suppress.
Wow. Okay, that's a huge framing shift. It puts the blame, if you like, on the design of the system, not on individuals.
Right.
And it feels like the system is just eating itself, and the younger folks are footing the bill. So we'll dig into why the older power structures point the finger at technology, the internet, for problems that seem much deeper.
The classic scapegoat.
Yeah. And we're going to uncover something fascinating, the meaning behind this symbol young protesters are using globally, the straw-watt pirate Jolly Roger.
That's right. The mission today is really to shine a light on this structural conflict. It's a fight over autonomy, really. How much freedom, how much variety does the younger generation get to keep? And we'll show why, based on how systems work, how they close themselves off, why a simple truce. It's just not structurally possible. But first, we really need to get a handle on the language, the technical terms for system failure. That's key to understanding just how unstable things are.
Okay, let's unpack this. Stafford Beer's starting point. He says the anger we see in young people, it's justified, but it's an epiphenomenon of systems, like a symptom, right?
Exactly. A visible sign of deep stress within the system. It's popping up because the core structures, government, the economy, even education, they're fundamentally failing to regulate things properly, failing to adapt.
And to really get why this failure is so big, you say we need this term, variety.
Yes, variety. It's crucial. In cybernetics, it's a technical term. It just means the number of possible states a system can have. Think of it as a measure of complexity, of potential,
Okay.
like the human brain. It's packed with variety, maybe 10 neurons, right? Each one a logical switch. That massive internal variety translates to, well, almost infinite potential for thought, creativity, new ideas, ways of being.
But our world now, with technology and global connection, it's generating way more than just simple complexity. Beer called it explosive variety.
Explosive is the right word. Think about it simply. If you have n things, the number of ways they can relate to each other is roughly n squared, n times n minus 1. It's exponential.
So not just adding connections, but multiplying them.
Precisely. 10 people interacting. That's 90 relationships. Double it to 20 people. You don't get 180 relationships, you get 380. Now scale that up. 8 billion people on the planet, linked instantly by tech.social media, fiber optics. The sheer number of possible interactions, influences, states, it's just exploded, way beyond what our old systems were ever built for.
Okay. So that's the mismatch. You have humans with huge innate variety living in an environment generating explosive variety. But our institutions, government, bureaucracy, the economy, they're stuck. They're out of gear, as Beer puts it, trying to run an exponential 21st century world with, 19th century linear thinking.
That's the core of it. And the cost. It falls squarely on the shoulders of the under 40s. Because the system is moving too fast, it never gets what's called relaxation time.
Relaxation time, what's that mean here?
It's the time a system needs to settle down after a shock. A crisis hits, big change happens.
Yeah.
The system needs time to absorb it, stabilize, find a new equilibrium, like traffic after a pileup,
Right, takes time for the jam to clear.
Exactly. But what if, before the first jam clears, there's another crash 5 miles down the road, and then another? The system never clears. It's stuck in perpetual gridlock. That's our governance now. Big crises, financial collapse, pandemic, climate stuff, they're hitting faster than the system can possibly settle.
So it's just constant oscillation, never stable.
Perpetual oscillation. And that forces everyone into non-stop crisis management. You see it everywhere. Governments, companies, just trying to damp down the latest fire, get the shaking to stop for 5 minutes.
And strategic thinking goes out the window.
Completely. Thinking beyond next week is a luxury. A month ahead. That's blue sky thinking, apparently. Impossible.
And this constant instability. It stops the system from learning, doesn't it? Which explains why young people are so distrustful.
Absolutely critical point. Learning, whether it's a person learning or an organization or a whole society, it needs a stable reference point. You need to run experiments, see what works, what doesn't. But if the ground is constantly shifting under your feet,
You can't run a fair test.
you can't run any valid test. So the system can't learn. It can't adapt. It just keeps making the same mistakes, maybe even faster. So why should young people trust institutions that are visibly running amok, visibly incapable of evolving?
So if the older generation, the ones in charge, are stuck inside these failing old models,
The ones that created the mess.
then the younger descent isn't some moral failing on their part. They're just reacting rationally to inheriting a system that's fundamentally broken.
Yeah.
And the older folks try to preserve it because admitting it's broken feels like total collapse.
It feels like catastrophic instability. They'd rather stick with more of the same, even if the same is clearly failing, because the alternative feels too terrifying.
Yeah.
And that difference in perspective, that's the structural conflict right there.
Okay, so the system's unstable, it can't learn, and individuals pay the price. Which brings us to this thing the sources call the variety squeeze. You're saying the anger, the rage from younger people, it comes from them seeing quite accurately that their options, their potential, their autonomy is being systematically choked off, even here in supposedly free societies.
It's a kind of subtle tyranny, yes.
Yeah.
Beer argued that much of the world lives under some form of control, whether it's obvious or hidden, that stops people expressing their full potential, their own spirit. We might call ourselves democracies, but how much real influence does the will of the people have when the system is just lurching from crisis to crisis, unable to learn or change course?
The sources say that will gets completely lost. People end up just receiving, on the receiving end of having their potential, their variety reduced, and the result is human capacity being degraded and debased. That sounds harsh, but it feels resonant with the under 40 experience.
It is harsh, but it's a cybernetic diagnosis. The immense, almost infinite variety of human potential gets funneled down, squeezed, by what Beer called bank upon bank of variety attenuators, constraints, until all that's left is a very narrow range of perceived choice.
Okay, variety attenuators, constraints. Let's make this concrete. But first you mentioned using the viable system model, the VSM, to see who's doing the squeezing.
Right, it helps clarify the roles. We can simplify it.
Yeah.
That's the doing part, the people actually working, living, studying, the citizens on the ground, where all the real potential, the high variety exists. System 3, S3, that's management or control. The bureaucracy, the government agencies, the bosses managing the day-to-day. Their job, essentially, is to manage S1's variety, keep things stable according to the rules. System 5, S5, that's the top level. Identity, governance. The part that sets the rules, defines what the system is, its purpose, its core values. Think of it as the established power structure, the generational authority.
Okay, so S5 sets the overall rules, the closure, and S3 implements them, often by squeezing the variety of S1, the people. Where do we see these attenuators hitting the under 40?
Oh, they're everywhere. Let's take two big ones that curb potential. First, the education paradox. We like to think education educare to lead out expands possibilities, right? Amplifies variety.
Yeah, more education, more options. That's the standard idea.
But cybernetically, institutionally, it often functions as a massive variety constraint.
How so?
Think about standardized testing. The whole process often narrows the student's thinking down to finding the one predetermined right answer. $6 times 77. It's 42. No room for exploring why or thinking about multiplication differently. Zero variety allowed in the output. It trains brains to conform, to seek the known low-variety answer the system expects.
And the sources say this even happens in higher education, like with PhDs.
Absolutely. If a student comes up with something genuinely new, something high variety that doesn't fit the supervisor's existing models, what often happens? Supervisor says, interesting, but I don't know about that. Why don't you do something related to my work?
Wow, so the system filters out
The
novelty.
existing control system, S3 and S5, they see the world through their established, often low variety, models. We all simplify reality, of course, but the institutional bias is often against true innovation because high variety feels like a threat to the established order. It's easier, safer, to stick with what's known.
And what about social pressures? You mentioned subcultural conformity as an attenuator.
Huge one. Often invisible because we just accept it. It's the pressure to fit in, to follow the right career path.
Yeah.
Doctor, lawyer, engineer, consultant, to talk the right way. Ever notice how everyone adopts that generic business speak?
Oh, yeah. Synergy,
Yeah,
leverage, bandwidth.
exactly. It's all variety reduction. Even consumer choices, the right car, the right neighborhood, the right brands. These are all ways individuals voluntarily squeeze their own immense potential variety down to fit into these narrow, socially acceptable boxes.
And for the under 40s, this feels particularly brutal. They're often starting out burdened with debt, facing instability, choosing a high variety path, like being an artist or a philosopher. The economic penalty is swift and severe, so they conform. They take the sensible, low variety corporate job just to make rent, even if it feels soul crushing.
The structure basically screams, you have all this amazing potential, but we'll only reward this tiny sliver of it that fits our current, frankly outdated needs. The anger comes from knowing your potential is being wasted, actively degraded by a system that can't even manage itself properly.
Okay, beyond the educational and social straitjackets, there's the big one, the one that really bites, the economic squeeze. Speaking as a millennial, this is absolutely where the rubber meets the road. The sources call it a neglected attenuator, but it feels front and center. It leaves so few people with real choices about how they spend their time, their energy, their lives, just stuck grinding.
It's arguably the most effective variety attenuator because it directly limits what System 1, the people, can actually do. Take debt. One source pointed out something staggering. Every baby born in the U.S. inherits something like $150,000 of the national debt. Think about that.
Wow.
That's a massive constraint slapped on your economic variety, your range of future possibilities, before you've even learned to walk. You're born indebted to the system built by previous generations.
That immediately frames this generational war, doesn't it? S5 and S3, the older structures, are trying to preserve their wealth, their consumption patterns. And S1, the younger generation, starts life owing the money to prop that up.
And this connects to a bleak forecast Beer made decades ago. He suggested unemployment is likely permanent, a permanent feature of society. Why? Because population growth plus technological acceleration means we simply cannot create traditional jobs fast enough for everyone under the current model.
Which logically means we need to completely rethink work, value, societal contribution. Things our current system seems utterly incapable of doing. Instead, it just tightens the economic screws further.
And exports the model. That's the consumption trap.
Mm.
Wealthy nations put enormous pressure on developing countries to mimic our consumption patterns. Finance our indulgence in absurdities, as Beer put it. You see people in deep poverty feeling they need a certain brand of washing machine or fridge because global media, often American soap operas, relentlessly pushes this image of how you should be living.
So we're attenuating global variety too, forcing everyone into one homogeneous, unsustainable consumption model that's already failing us.
And the tragic irony. Even within that model, we get the homogeneity trap. We think we have endless choice, 40 kinds of burgers, so many options. But look closer. What's the actual result? Often, it's more uniformity, not less. Think about new housing developments.
Yeah, endless rows of identical beige boxes. Stamp par, as the source says, cookie cutter.
Exactly. More common. Fewer genuinely different ways to live, less ecological variety, less architectural variety. More options, paradoxically, lead to less meaningful variety, just minor variations on the same low variety theme.
Now let's look at the power dynamic, how management, System 3, sees this versus how the people, System 1, experience it. Management often has less variety than the operation they're trying to control, right?
Correct. The
Yeah.
shop floor, the workforce, the citizenry, that's where the real complexity, the high variety resides. Management, S3, looks down and sees chaos, unpredictability. So their attempt to impose rules, procedures, standardization, they see that as necessary. Calming of variety, making things manageable, predictable.
But if you're on the receiving end, the worker, the student, the millennial, trying to build a life.
You experience it completely differently. You see it as gross interference with individual liberty. You know your own potential, your own variety, is vastly greater than the narrow box the system is trying to force you into.
And that mismatch, calming from above versus interference from below, that's the core conflict generator. The economy S3 and S5 will allow S1.
Precisely. It's the fundamental tension in any hierarchical system.
Yeah.
And it's exactly this tension that Stafford Beard tried to address directly in Chile with Project Cybersyn.
Ah, yes, the Chilean experience under Allende. That was incredibly ambitious.
It was revolutionary, a real attempt to use cybernetics for liberation, not just control. The goal wasn't top-down command. It was to manage the entire social economy in near real time, connecting something like 12 levels of organization from whole industrial sectors right down to individual factories and workers.
But how on earth did they plan to get real-time information from, copper mines in the Andes and factories scattered across the country in the early 70s?
That was the genius. They used high-variety communication flows. One key tool was the algedonic meter. Algedonic means pleasure-pain. These were simple devices, basically feedback boxes, put right on the factory floor.
Okay.
Workers could use them anonymously to signal their immediate reaction. Good reaction, bad reaction, to management decisions, working conditions, production targets, anything, instantly. These signals would then flow up through the system.
So Management System 3 could actually see the collective mood, the high-variety reality of System 1 as decisions were being made for the first time ever.
Exactly. It was designed to give the boss immediate feedback from the people being managed, to hold power accountable to the lived reality of the shop floor. If policy was bad, if it was reducing well-being or interfering badly, the system would light up instantly with negative feedback. It was about ensuring requisite variety. The controllers needed information variety that matched the complexity of what they were controlling.
That's incredible. But how did they sell this? Didn't people see it as, like, Big Brother technology?
That was the other stroke of genius. Beer knew technology alone wasn't enough.
Yeah.
You needed social buy-in. So they didn't just impose the tech. They brought in artists, musicians, poets.
Really?
Yes. They commissioned songs about cybernetics, about the computers, about the system, set to popular folk tunes. So they used culture, high-variety culture, to teach people the philosophy behind it, that this system was meant to empower them, to give them a voice, not just monitor them. It was an attempt to build a high-variety control system that respected and amplified human potential, of course,
It got shut down violently.
by the 1973 coup. But it stands as this incredible and maybe tragic example of what could be possible if we design systems to manage complexity through variety instead of just trying to crush it. A potential that was lost when the old, obsolete, low-variety forces won out.
Okay, that Chilean example shows technology could empower people, give System 1 a voice. Yet today, we hear the exact opposite, right? The listener pointed this out. The older generation, the established government, System 5, constantly blaming the internet for the nihilism, the problems of the youth. Why blame the tool?
It's pure, deep down, it's failing. The current structures, the way we run government, the economy, they're reductionist. They simplify reality too much, and they are structurally incapable of changing course easily. Admitting the real problem that the organizational design itself, the very identity of System 5, is obsolete.
That would risk total breakdown.
It risks catastrophic instability. It's like asking the system to perform surgery on itself, maybe even commit organizational suicide. So what's the easier move?
Blame something external. Blame the tool.
Exactly. Blame technology. Blame the computer, the internet. Frame it as this scary, uncontrollable juju that's corrupting everyone. It allows the system to hide the real culprit, its own outdated design. The cybernetic truth, according to Beer, is the opposite. The computer, technology properly used, isn't the threat. It's really their only hope for handling the explosive variety they're drowning in.
It's funny, isn't it? People feel fine driving a car, a complex machine they don't fully understand.
They feel they dominate the car even if they can't fix the engine.
Right, but the computer, they feel ill at ease because they don't dominate it in the same way. And we forget maybe how long it took to adapt to other disruptive technologies. Generations for electricity, for cars on lethal roads. But the internet revolution, it's really only been a full-on social force for maybe 20, 25 years.
And this scapegoating is dangerous because the internet has undeniably amplified problems, but not created them from scratch. Look at the data around the 2012 inflection point.
Right, you mentioned this. What exactly happened around 2012? It felt like a shift.
The data is pretty stark. Around 2012, things like smartphone penetration, social media use, global connectivity, they hit a peak saturation point. But at the same time, almost every measure of social health started to plummet. Trust in institutions, trust in media, trust in each other, feelings of community, even self-reported happiness, all began a sharp, accelerating decline.
While polarization.
Affective polarization, basically. How much you actively dislike people on the other political side went through the roof right after 2012.
So the tech meant to connect us actually drove us apart. Fragmented reality. How?
It seems the internet, this massive variety amplifier, interacted catastrophically with our existing, often obsolete human social structures and cognitive biases. The algorithms, designed purely for engagement, learned that outrage, tribalism, and confirmation bias work really well.
So they fed us more of what kept us clicking, even if it was divisive.
Exactly. Hyper-targeting created intense filter bubbles. We stopped sharing a common reality. System 1, the populace, got fragmented into countless little echo chambers, each convinced of its own truth, increasingly unable to understand, let alone trust, the others. The sheer speed and volume of misinformation exploded, making it impossible to know what was real.
And this isn't just abstract. You mentioned AI tools like Sora making fake videos.
Yeah, they pour gasoline on the fire. They make it trivially easy to create realistic-looking fake content, flooding the zone, drowning out actual important information. Like those fake Hurricane Melissa videos, sharks and flooded streets of Jamaica, they looked real enough to get hundreds of thousands of views.
Which forces officials to waste time debunking fakes instead of giving real safety advice.
A total waste of attention and resources. And worse, people see these fakes, maybe they seem over the top, and they start to underestimate the real danger. They take risks they shouldn't. Remember that Ferndale scavenger hunt hoax? People were ready to drive for hours based on a post from an obvious parody account.
Because it's easier to get excited and share than to take 10 seconds to check the source. Read the bio, look at past posts.
Sadly, yes. Our critical thinking infrastructure hasn't kept pace with the tech. So System 5 points at the noise, the chaos, the misinformation amplified by the internet and says, see, that's the problem.
When really the internet just revealed and turbocharged the underlying weaknesses. The inability of the old low-variety system to handle the new high-variety reality.
Precisely. Blaming the computer is the ultimate distraction tactic. It avoids confronting the painful truth. The organizational system itself is failing.
Okay, so we have this generation, everyone under 40 really, millennials included, feeling this squeeze. Their potential choked off, facing debt, instability, a system that can't learn, and now this chaotic, fragmented information environment. When everything feels broken, what do you rally around? What banner possibly unites people in that kind of storm?
The unity comes from that shared experience, that feeling of being attenuated, squeezed. So the symbol has to represent the opposite. It has to signal complete rejection of the controlling system and a powerful demand for, well, for freedom, for high-variety life outside the walls.
And that symbol, surprisingly, is the Straw Pirates' Jolly Roger. From the anime and manga One Piece. The sources confirm this. Gen Z protesters are actually using this fictional pirate flag globally.
It's a fascinating choice. And cybernetically, it makes perfect sense. Why? Because it's not a traditional political flag. It carries zero baggage from failed 20th century ideologies. Its meaning is immediate, universally understood within that fandom, and resonant beyond it. It's about seeking freedom, friendship, and adventure.
Fortune, too, maybe.
And fortune, yes. While actively fighting back against a controlling authoritarian world government. In the story, the world government is the ultimate System 5, secretive, oppressive, determined to control information, erase history, and crush individual dreams and potential. The ultimate variety attenuator.
So waving that flag, it's not just cosplay. It's a direct cybernetic demand.
Absolutely. It's a clear, unified demand for autonomy. It's saying, we reject your system's attempt to reduce our variety, to limit our possibilities. We demand release from the constraints, the debt, the conformity, the lack of real options that you've imposed on us. It's the high-variety elements of the system rising up against the low-variety controls trying to keep them contained.
And this definitely resonates with the listener's point about people in their 30s siding with the pirates. Millennials have been living this squeeze for years. They hit the job market after 2008, got loaded with debt, watched the system panic, and just doubled down on the old ways.
Millennials were arguably the first generation to really feel the full force of that variety attenuation post-financial crisis. Their potential got squeezed hard. Now Gen Z is inheriting an even more precarious, more chaotic version. So that pirate flag becomes a kind of generational symbol, maybe even a handshake, saying, we see the system for what it is, and we demand agency. We demand our variety back.
But there's a dark side to this too, isn't there? When individuals get completely lost in this chaos, when their potential feels totally crushed.
Yes, when the system grinds down an individual's variety to almost nothing, when they feel invisible, powerless, without purpose, they become, as the sources say, fundamentally lost. And this systemic despair, this crushing of potential, is linked directly to some of the most tragic outcomes: nihilism, mental health crises, and even acts of violence, particularly among young men.
What's the cybernetic connection there? Why does feeling lost and attenuated lead some towards violence?
From a purely systemic view, if your existence, your variety, feels like it's being reduced to zero by the system, then a dramatic, high-impact act, even a horrific act of violence, becomes a terrible way to force the system to acknowledge your existence, to scream your variety into the void.
A desperate signal.
A desperate, destructive signal. It's a way to make your presence known in a blaze of violence when you feel completely unseen and degraded otherwise. The sources suggest that some of these terrible acts, these political attacks or public violence by young men, aren't just about ideology. They can also be the lashing out of individuals so fundamentally lost, so crushed by the system, that they tragically see violence as the thing to do, just to assert that they exist at all.
So they become the ultimate victims of the variety squeeze, turning their force. That's deeply disturbing.
Which brings us back to the structure. Why can't there just be a truce? Why can't the generations find common ground? You're saying the conflict itself, the clash between the old closed system and this demand for autonomy, makes a truce structurally impossible.
According to Beer's cybernetics, yes. The core reason lies in something fundamental to how any viable system survives: the totalitarian nature of organizational closure.
Okay, organizational closure. What does that mean for a government or a society? For any system, to be a system, a company, a nation, anything, it has to define itself. It has to draw a boundary. This is called the act of closure. It's where the system says, this is who we are, these are our rules, our values, our goals, this is how we operate, this is the reality we recognize, and none other.
Like defining the identity of the system, System 5 doing its job.
Exactly. System 5 performs this act of closure. Think about the dominant post-war model in America. Certain economic assumptions, social norms, political structures. That was a closure. It defined the system.
And Beer called the outcome totalitarian. Why?
Because once that closure is established, once System 5 says, this is us, anything or anyone that fundamentally challenges that definition, that doesn't fit inside the boundary, is automatically perceived as a threat, as alien, as a parasite or a virus that must be contained or eliminated to protect the integrity of the defined system.
So the system inherently defends its current definition.
Vigorously. It's a self-preservation mechanism. It doesn't easily say, oh, you have a point, maybe your core identity is wrong. It says, you are attacking who we are, and you must be stopped. Beer called this mechanism very totalitarian because it structurally excludes fundamental difference.
Okay, now I see the listener's point about the older generation, maybe 45 or 50 plus, having a freak out, clutching their pearls, their assets, their nostalgic pathology.
That's System 5 in defense mode. They are desperately trying to preserve the closure they benefited from, the one that defines their identity and validates their life's work and accumulated assets. The whole government structure, S5, S4, S3, is trapped inside those older reductionist models.
So asking them to genuinely change, to embrace the high variety the young represent, to fundamentally alter the structure,
Is asking them to invalidate their own closure, to admit their map of reality is wrong. It's asking the existing structure to commit organizational suicide. The systems don't do that voluntarily. They resist. They fight back. They prefer more of the same, even if it's failing, because fundamental change feels like death.
So they double down, tighten the constraints on the youth, blame the internet, anything but question the core assumptions of their closed system.
Precisely. They see the high variety of the youth, the pirate flag demand for autonomy, as fundamentally new, therefore dangerous, therefore a threat to be suppressed, not embraced. Their structural response to overwhelming external variety is always to reduce internal variety, to enforce the old rules harder.
And if a system can't update its identity, it's System 5. If it can't look ahead with System 4, it breaks down. This is the deer-cat analogy.
Yes, the System 5 problem. Beer used this slightly absurd metaphor. A truly viable system needs all its parts. It needs operations, S1, S2, S3, but critically it needs foresight, System 4, to look ahead and adapt, and identity, System 5, to define its purpose and values in relation to the changing world. If you only have the operational bits, 3, 2, and 1,
You get
a reactive, crisis-oriented deer cat is what you've got, pegged down on the table.
a deer-cat.
Yeah, it's a non-viable hybrid. The deer part is agile, reactive, like Systems 1, 3. The cat part represents identity, System 5. A deer cat can't survive. And being pegged down on the table means it's completely constrained, unable to adapt or evolve. It can only react offensively within its immediate, failing reality.
So this generational conflict, it's the death rattle of the deer-cat system. A closed, obsolete system trying desperately to enforce its rules against a world whose variety it simply cannot contain anymore.
That's the cybernetic diagnosis. The war for the future is this structural fight. The older generation defending the closure of the dying deer cat, and the younger generation demanding the freedom, the variety, the autonomy that the deer cat system, by its very nature, must deny them. That denial guarantees the conflict continues until one structure breaks. A truce isn't on the table. #outro. So stepping back, we've tried to frame this generational war not as a simple clash of personalities or politics, but as a deep cybernetic clash. It's low variety, rigid institutions struggling against the sheer explosive potential, the variety of humans in a complex world. The fight, fundamentally, is for autonomy symbolized powerfully by that pirate flag against all the forces trying to squeeze down possibilities, debt, conformity, homogeneity. And because the existing system defines itself through this act of closure, it's structurally wired to reject the very changes needed for survival, making a peaceful resolution, a truce, almost impossible without one side fundamentally giving way.
And for you listening, maybe feeling caught in this, feeling the squeeze, remember that key insight from Beer. Tinkering won't fix it. 80 times nothing is nothing. Small adjustments to a broken structure. Pointless. The tools we need, like technology, like the computer, they're not the enemy the old system makes them out to be. They're potentially their only hope, our only hope, for navigating this overwhelming complexity, but only if we use them within a new kind of structure.
Which leaves us with a really tough challenge. If the old system is incapable of reforming itself, and the demand from the young is for radical economy, for unleashed variety, how do you organize that? How do you build the alternative?
Yeah, the sources hint at this paradox. To fight the old, low-variety control system, you might need effective organization. You might need to temporarily manage or even constrict some variety in the short term just to build the collective power needed to dismantle the obsolete structures.
And that leads to the final, really provocative question, especially for anyone inspired by that pirate flag. How do you organize a high-variety revolt for autonomy without the organization itself becoming just another low-variety controlling system? How do you build something new that is defined not by closure and control, but by openness, by variety amplification, by the capacity to constantly learn and evolve, avoiding becoming the thing you fight? That is the monumental challenge ahead.
A challenge to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today.